Hey all, back with another Spotlight with Context, and today we'll be talking about the update to Mr. Sinister. I expect this will be a relatively short one because not that much has changed, but the changes are pretty fundamental to his playstyle, and I think some people didn't really understand how Mr. Sinister worked in the first place, so we might as well go over it, right? So I'm going to skip over the base stats because nothing has changed there. His prestige hasn't even changed because it was already okay, and that's pretty much what you'll see. He's around the level of Emma Frost as a 7-star. We can move on to the attributes here. Survivability of 3. He doesn't really have net positive regen as an attacker unless you are very ramped, but he does have good block proficiency and can regen against crits, and so in general, he's just a little tankier than average, which is about what this represents. Damage of 4, his damage is very good now. It is a little bit conditional, you do kind of have to work for it, but once you get it, there's a lot more of a damage payout with this update, which we will talk about. Ease of use 3, there is actually a rotation now, and so you kind of have to play through it. For anyone who liked playing Sinister before, it's definitely recognizable, so don't worry. The heavy charge and all of that is still there, but what you get from it is a better payout. And I think the old rotation was roughly a 3, it's just now you are actually getting something for it. Utility of 3, I think, is fair. There are a couple things in here to kind of modernize him as a mutant, make him better against some dangerous skill defenders. And then defender strength of 4, there are a lot of little annoyances in this kit, and for the most part, they have kind of been shored up and modernized. So he's going to be annoying. He's going to need an answer, but the good news is that a lot of tech champions will be able to answer him. So, continuing on to strengths and weaknesses, these are pretty simple. For strengths, he has regen, right? It is very difficult to mess with his regen. If you crit against him, he's going to get some of it back. The longer the fight goes on, the more he gets back, and eventually he can even go net positive. And then, you really don't want to use damaging debuffs on him. He throws them back at you, and now he throws them back at you as degen. We'll get to that soon. As far as weaknesses, his regen's really good, but if you heal block his regen, his health pool isn't that big. He doesn't really have any other defenses like armor or anything, and so you'll cut through him pretty quickly. Additionally, he now has an explicit weakness against robots. He can't throw his degens at them, and therefore he just doesn't have a whole lot of a threat. So moving on to the abilities, many of these are the same, but we'll go over them anyway. He is still immune to both taunt and reverse controls. A new ability, he reduces the potency of incoming bleed effects by 100%. This applies to passives and instants, so it will catch bullseye, and it also lets him take certain nodes that put bleeds on you, right? Kind of like Omega Red or Magneto. His telekinetic powers allow him to block unblockable special attacks, but this does not work against tech champions. It is still a very, very powerful ability, gives you a lot of coverage. It's not just against skill champions. You can use this against mutants, cosmics, etc. But as part of the update and the modernization, it doesn't work against techs. I think that's probably a fair trade. Well-timed blocks now grant a bulwark buff, increasing block proficiency by a small amount for 10 seconds, but these can stack up to 5. So obviously if your opponent can crit through blocks, Sinister still does regen that, but the idea here was to reward you for doing the well-timed block and just go a little bit above and beyond the reduction the mastery gives you. Additionally, whenever a skill champion purifies a debuff, the ability accuracy of their purify chance goes down by 25% for the rest of the fight, up to 100%. So this isn't a full purify shutoff from the very beginning of the fight, but if you were doing a longer fight, your skill opponents are only going to be able to purify 4 times for the most part, and then you're going to come online. This is ability accuracy, and so extra ability accuracy will get around this, especially since it's only capped at minus 100%. But this is still a very, very strong ability. And against skill champions, you're not really going to have to worry about purify abilities most of the time. Now moving on to the regen, which is one of the main stars of the show here. So Mr. Sinister's regen rate cannot be reduced. This used to be cannot be reduced below 0. Now it's just cannot be reduced. Petrify doesn't work on him. Despair doesn't work on him. Cannot be reduced. You have to heal block. Whenever he gets crit, he has a 100% chance to regen 70% of the damage dealt over 0.5 seconds. Abilities cannot modify the ability accuracy, duration, or potency of this ability, but it is still subject to regen rate. What that means is that if an effect says that regeneration effects are actually stronger, that would not work here, right? They can't get stronger or weaker, but something that actually changes the regen rate would. And so what that means is that it's still open to recovery. The recovery mastery increases regen rate, and so Sinister can still benefit from that. His regen rate can't go down, but it can go up. Additionally, his regen rate is increased by 1% for every hit in the opponent's combo meter, up to 50. So that means that you have a base regen rate of 100, plus 15 from the recovery mastery, plus up to 50 more from this, which means you can have a regen rate of 165. If you take 70% of the damage from crits and multiply it by 1.65, you get 115.5, which means that Mr. Sinister can net regen from critical hits and actually gain 15% of what the damage was. So this is very powerful if you're facing somebody with a lot of crits or even guaranteed crits. Otherwise is just generally good and is going to be annoying on defense, because if he lasts long enough for you to build your combo, then he's going to start net healing from your crits. So watch out for that. Moving on to wall charging a heavy attack. This is what I meant by there used to be a rotation here, but the payoff wasn't really that great. Now there is. So let's talk about that. While charging a heavy, Mr. Sinister pauses all damaging debuffs, stuns, concussions, and power steals on the opponent. If he charges the heavy attack for a full second, which is easier because he's pausing the parry stun, right? Then he gets a vicious passive, increasing the potency of damaging debuffs applied to the opponent by 30% for 8 seconds. If you charge the heavy attack for another second, again, fine because you can pause the stun, then you trigger genetic manipulation. This is an effect on Mr. Sinister that lasts for 7 seconds, and every 0.7 seconds, he inflicts a 10-second bleed debuff on himself. Now this deals no damage on its base. Even if it did, it wouldn't, because he has a 100% resistance to bleed. But I'm calling out that it does no damage, so that you know even if he is facing a character or a node that increases bleed damage, these won't suddenly start hurting himself. These are purely fuel for his abilities and for willpower. Now the reason you care about this is that once you get those 10-second bleed debuffs on yourself, you're going to want to throw your special one, because that's going to transfer all damaging debuffs on Mr. Sinister, including all those bleeds you just put on yourself, to any non-robot opponent, converting them into degen debuffs that now have a set amount of damage. The way Mr. Sinister used to work was very janky and actually copied the exact potency of the debuffs and their duration. It was cool, but just trust me when I say, as a designer and as a coder, it was not worth it. And this is going to be significantly more standardized and in many cases more powerful, especially because part of this trade is he now applies debuffs to himself that do no damage, and then he throws those so that they actually do damage. This ability activates even if the attack is blocked or avoided, as you may be used to if you fought Mr. Sinister. And then, here's the defensive part. Mr. Sinister inflicts himself with a non-stacking 0 potency bleed for 20 seconds after this special attack. So you don't have to worry about this special attack putting a bleed on himself and then immediately throwing a degen. But if you allow him to throw 2 special attacks back to back, then he's going to put a bleed on himself, and then with the next special, he's going to throw that degen on you. So you can play around this without a robot, but it's definitely much, much easier if you do have a robot. As far as the heavy attack, that is pretty much entirely attacker side. Like, it's fun to use as an attacker, but as a defender, I don't think this is ever really going to come up. You just have to worry about him spamming special ones and about putting any debuffs on him with your own kit that he might then throw at you. Or you bring a robot, and none of that is a problem at all. So, Special 2 is pretty much unchanged. 100% chance to inflict concussion. Does not need to land, just reduces the opponent's ability accuracy by 100% for 6 seconds. And then if it does hit, it also stuns, which then allows you to go into your whole charge heavy thing that much more easily. Special 3 is also unchanged. Also a concussion, this one lasts longer, and you inflict a power steal debuff, which steals 20% of max power over 3 seconds. Bit weird in a mutant, but nice little bit of utility. Moving on to the signature ability, this is also pretty similar to what it used to be. When Mr. Sinister defeats an opponent, he extracts their genetic code, gaining a permanent passive for the rest of the quest. He can have up to 3 for each class, and a total of 10. Mutant gives prowess, skill gives precision, science gives a bonus to regen rate, Mystic gives a bonus to combat power rate, basically an energize, and Cosmic gives damage in the form of a Fury. You don't get anything against Tex because they have a class advantage against you, right? But here's the change. Now Mr. Sinister starts each fight with 3 of these effects at random. These do not count towards the max, so if you were ramped all the way up to 10 persistent passives, then you'll start the fight with 13. You just won't have control over what those last 3 are. But these do not persist between fights and basically just raise both the floor and the ceiling on this ability. So once you have his SIG, something still happens in Battlegrounds or if you were otherwise not able to ramp him, and he's going to feel better in that first fight, so you're more likely to win in the first place and therefore be better able to ramp him going forward. But that is pretty much Mr. Sinister. His synergies are unchanged. He is obviously going to be quite good with his own relic because it places a bleed on himself, which is going to give you another debuff to throw with your special 1, and is going to place either a precision or a cruelty on himself, depending on the runes you pick. That's the obvious choice with relics. A lot of different masteries you can pick with him. Yes, he can now throw the recoil debuffs from Liquid Courage and Double Edge at the opponent as degens. In general, though, on defense, he's going to play somewhat similarly. You just have to watch for those special ones being too close to each other. And that is a real threat, right? If you don't have a way to deal with the degen, either through some kind of resistance, or healing, or debuff duration down, because remember, Purify will only get you so far, that's going to be a problem. But now he has a hard counter in that robots just don't have to deal with his degen at all. And there are also some robots that are pretty good at dealing with regen, and so those will do really well against him. I won't pretend he's not a harder defender now. That is part of the purpose here, that he's a bit more relevant. You have to deal with the healing with heal block, or you can just not land any critical hits, right? Somebody like Prowler or Shocker still has that on him and will not have to worry about it. But if you have a robot that either heal blocks or a robot that doesn't crit, there are a couple of those, then you're going to be really well situated against him. So he's more of a threat, but has harder counters, and now he actually has an offensive kit that can be very potent. You'll see footage of him soon, but I think for now we'll leave it there, and just let me know what you're thinking in the comments below. Until next time, thanks so much for watching, and take care.